Per usual, everything on this channel is for educational purposes only. It's not intended as financial advice. Let's continue talking about some actionable cloud signals on this Teaching Tech Tuesday. I'll talk about the Kumo Breakout today and why that's significant. But first, as a reminder, settings for the cloud that I use are 2061, 2030. If you don't change your settings, my clouds will look slightly different than yours. So for crypto, I used 2061, 2030, and then for legacy, I use 1852, 104, 26. For legacy, those settings are default doubled, except for the last number, which is cloud displacement. And then for crypto, it's default doubled and then slightly adjusted for 24/7 markets. At least that's the argument based on backtesting. I believe it works slightly better. Forward testing over the past decade, I can tell you, it does a great job of getting you in and out at the right time, which is why I've continued to use it. Higher time frames always win. I'm going to talk about the daily, the 3-day, the weekly, the 4-hour, the 6-hour, the 8-hour. But just remember, if you're above a cloud on a weekly, that's much more powerful than being above the cloud on the 4-hour. The real question to ask is, does a signal on the 4-hour have any less actionability than something on the weekly? And that's where you sort of have to read the room and say, are we above the 4-hour in a broader trend? Are we above the weekly for the first time in 3 years, right? Those are different types of signals, both very valuable. And maybe you size that trade a little differently if you're above the 3-day cloud for the first time since 2021, right? Versus being above the 4-hour cloud for the first time in the past 2 weeks. You know, depending on what's going on in the broader trend, that's what this is all about. Measuring the trend, that's what the cloud is great at. It'll adjust your sizing probably a little bit. I'll talk about alts too and how to look at those on low time frames, because inevitably I'm going to get the question, hey, does this work on the 5-minute? And again, sure, it works in quotes, air quotes, but you're better off using the 1-hour, the 4-hour, the 6-hour. The real issue is a lot of these new coins don't have enough data to actually populate a 4-hour cloud. Okay, so that's a red flag right there. And again, a reminder on the checklist, what am I looking for on any trade? You're looking for the trifecta, price above cloud or below cloud, the cloud bullish or bearish, and then the TK cross bullish or bearish. You want all those in alignment. The lagging span I never use, so I don't really talk about it. But that is a fourth prong should you so choose to use it. And as far as the actionable signals go, the Kumo Breakout is arguably the single most important. It sets the tone for the trend. Kumo being the cloud. Are you above it or below it? It's binary. There's a third option here, obviously. If you're inside of the cloud, you're neutral. You're probably range bound, and likelihoods of up or down are 50-50 effectively. Unless you're coming off of a prolonged bull trend or a prolonged bear trend, then we float into the edge-to-edge category. But for the most part, the breakout sets the tone above or below the cloud. That's why it's so important and just so easy to use on any chart, any time frame. In a millisecond, you know, okay, we're above the cloud-ish on the daily Bitcoin chart here. Is this signal the same as a breakout in October? It is not. I'm not just saying that because we're going up, or we've gone up significantly since then. But what you always want to see, you know, here's again, prolonged downtrend. The signal, the first time you're above the cloud on a time frame over the course of a month, months, or year, or years, that's a big time change in direction and should be traded accordingly. So as we stand here on the daily, there's an expectation that we will continue to push above the cloud, push above the cloud, push above the cloud. The broader trend remains bullish. That's an expectation. So any breakout from inside of the cloud should be taken seriously. The issue here is we're just sort of range bound, wishy-washy. The signal itself is weaker because we aren't really going anywhere, right? Now that's different again from October. So what the best signal going forward and what you want to see is the October signal. It's the December 2023 signal or 2022 signal. You'll hear me say, you know, let everything flip bearish. That is the highest conviction signal you will get, because that's the market telling you, yes, for the first time in quite some time, we are now flipping back to the bullish side. Now, to be clear, this is neutral currently. This isn't exactly bearish, but as far as ease of trading, hit rate, probability, likelihood, you always want to see stuff like December 2022, October 2023. Another great thing about crypto, most of the time, I'd argue we are actually trending. Most of the time on the daily, we're trending. We have been trending since 2023. We've been trending higher. We have brief periods of ranging, but prior to that, we were trending down for months and months and months and months. That's why something like Ichimoku works well in the first place. And you can backtest this. You can look at the last halving period post-COVID, mostly above the cloud, briefly in and out of the cloud for October, and that was it. You were above the cloud the entire time until the very end. So if in 2025 or whenever, months from now, we start closing below the cloud like we did, or in the cloud like we did in April 2021, that is a massive, massive warning sign that the trend is experiencing a change of character. It is experiencing weakness, range-bound neutrality, or bearishness becomes more likely. That is why, one of the reasons, the cloud is telling you to jump out of your long positions when you're above or below the cloud when that changes, because it's trying to protect you from potential downside. Obviously, this isn't always perfect. It's not going to give you 300% trends every time, but the point is, if you are on the right side of the cloud in your trading, you are less likely to get bulldozed by some 300% trend, right? If you're paying attention to the cloud in October, it's telling you over and over and over again to stay long. Do not think about shorting this entire time, right? Same thing with April to July 2019. Shorts were over. It told you the opposite shortly thereafter. Then there was a massive, rangy, noisy, choppy area pre-post-COVID. And I'm not just hand-waving that. It's just to say, look, it's not always going to be perfect, but when it's right, it's very right. It's extremely right. And this is what you want, right? You want to make 4 and lose 1, right? If you make 4 and lose 1, then you're still up 3. So that's what you want to do. And that's what the cloud is continuously trying to get you to do. If you look at the daily 2016 to 2019, same story, right? We're seeing a lot of this now where we're dipping into the cloud and not quite breaking through the cloud. So anytime we dip in and out, that could also be seen as a re-entry signal on the long side, dependent on a few factors, outside of headline risk or regulatory risk or event-driven volatility, whatever else is going on, right? Also things to consider. But throughout most of Bitcoin's history, we have trended quite well. 2014, 2015, messy, not perfect, generally down, but just using the cloud, it gives you a pretty good idea of where you're going. I remember 2014, it wasn't fun. I remember GOX exploding. It wasn't fun. I remember getting back above the cloud in 2015 thinking, okay, this is it, right? Then you get the inverted Adam and Eve, and then some whale on Bitfinex is selling, and it's all not fun because the signals aren't exactly correct, but at the same time, we're also in this broader range, which you know of even going back as early as April. So we're trending most of the time. The cloud's great at that. It's great at picking out those trends. It has a very difficult time with ranging, with range-bound action. This is arguably one of the best Wyckovian accumulation periods you're ever going to see. It's textbook. But the cloud is not great at that. It's great at picking out a change of trend over the course of months, like it did in 2013. It got you in at 100. It gets you out at 600 to 800, depending on how you want to read that, without anything else, just the cloud, right? So even if you're not using the TK cross and everything else, at the very least, you can do yourself a favor and just look at where are we sitting on your favorite alt or whatever you're trading, Solana. Where are we sitting on the daily cloud? That really sets the tone for the trend. If there's enough data for what you're trading, you can look at the higher time frames. For me personally, I need the higher time frame to sort of confirm. So, I don't like trading newly listed altcoins that only have a 15-minute cloud, okay? That's really just not for me. But on something like Bitcoin, we've got over a decade of history. So you can see how this has played out above or below the cloud, inside of the cloud, where we are now relative to the cloud, how bullish we are now relative to the weekly cloud, right? So there's this bullish continuation expectation just built in based on where we are relative to the cloud. Using other methods, you could say, okay, are we overbought or oversold? using lower time frames, using the TK cross, the TK disequilibrium. You could even say up here relative to where we are based on the weekly cloud, we're pretty far away from the weekly cloud, maybe a dangerous sign. But again, historically, we love it above the daily weekly, we love it above or below the weekly cloud. We tend to spend a long time above or below those levels. So depending on if you're a day trader, a swing trader, an investor, you're probably going to use a different time frame. You're going to have a different time horizon. If you're like me, you've got allocations sort of for all three of those things. The hodler probably paying more attention to the weekly, the higher time frames. Day trader obviously paying attention to like the 4 hour on down, but the cloud is there to help you on any time frame. Here's the 8 hour. And if you know the daily is broadly bullish, if you know the weekly is broadly bullish, and you want maybe a fine-tuned knob on intra-week trend or something like that, you can use the 4 hour, you can use the 8 hour, you'll see me use the 12 hour on alts. I'm looking for something that has an actionable signal that has, in recent history, backtested well. That's really all I'm looking for. So if we look at the 8 hour, I'll look at the Solana in a second, but even on 8 hour BTC, these signals have been excellent, right? So even up here, if we're still below the 8 hour cloud, it says, wait, let it do its thing. Let it potentially make a right shoulder here on the inverted head and shoulders, whatever, let it chop around. I'd rather wait and be late on this than pretend to know what's going on and say, you know what, this is going to bounce. We can look at how it acted in June, how it acted in September, how it acted in March 2023, right? It just says this needs more time. Needs more time at the moment. Wait for bullishness on the 8 hour. Wait for price back above the cloud on the 8 hour. I also talked about the 4 hour trade on BitX this week. So this is actually the wrong settings, but you get the point. Above or below the cloud is where you want to be to match your trade. We are broadly long. You should be looking for longs. You should be expecting higher highs over lower lows. And the question to ask is, where's the next best entry? The next best entry is going to be above the cloud. So here's the real 4 hour legacy cloud. To me, this looks a little better. It's very nuanced. It gets you in a little bit earlier. Arguably, it's mostly the same, but in any event, this is what you're looking for. Price above the cloud. This, much like many alts, just is recently listed. It just got listed last year. It doesn't have a lot of trading data anyway. So there's nothing that says you can't go down to a lower time frame and just check, is the cloud being respected or not? Is this a worthy signal on a lower time frame or not? If it isn't, then you don't use it. But most of the time, it's probably going to be pretty good. So what I'd be looking for here is anything above 42 to 48-ish. It's going to be whatever the cloud is at that time, 44.5. But the time frame is low enough that you can watch it once a day, twice a day. You're not watching this once every other month, like maybe you are on the weekly. As a more active trader, using a lower time frame makes sense. And if the actionable signals are real, and if the risk reward setups for the trades are real, why not, right? So again, this is just telling me right here instantly that now is not the time to be on the long side. Before I go over some more examples here, let me mention today's video sponsor, Kraken Pro. Kraken Pro is a complete overhaul of the Kraken trading experience with a one-stop shop for advanced and professional traders. Kraken Pro enables efficient trading execution across multiple markets with a UI that allows for unique optimization tailored to your trading style. You can check out Kraken Pro with the link in the description of this video. Not investment advice. Crypto trading involves risk of loss. Cryptocurrency services are provided to U.S. and U.S. territory customers by Payward Ventures Inc., PVI, DBA, Kraken. So on Kraken Pro, there is an indicator suite, much like TradingView, and you can just search cloud or Ichi and it'll pop up. So to add this to the chart, I'll hide what I have here. You'll see it's kind of like faded and muted just on the default settings. You can see the lagging span on there. So again, I like to take off the lagging span. I like to really bump up what the cloud looks like so it's more prominent on the chart. I usually turn down the cloud lines themselves, and then I usually make the TK lines super bright and large and bold. That way they don't get lost in the noise of the chart there. And then obviously you'll change the settings to 20, 60, 120, 30, if you want, right? I just think, to me, this it's like having fuzzy glasses and then wiping them off and fixing them, or not wearing glasses, having blurry vision, and then fixing it with glasses, right? Correcting your vision. what you're effectively doing here is just bumping up the timeframes on the signal. You're taking in more data capture, and I just think it's a cleaner read. That's why I use it. So if we turn off the TK lines, again, you can just turn those off if you want. And let's say you're not a massive cloud trader, but you like the idea of having the cloud on the chart. You can just tone that down, right? Just so it sort of fades in the background. I know lots of people who don't even use anything else other than the cloud. It's good enough to just see what's going on. So again, on the daily here, we are just garbled nothing. You know, there's not really anything going on here. We're snaking in and out of the cloud on the daily still. So depending on your favorites list, whatever you want to look at, you can quickly go down the list here and instantly see, okay, that one's in the cloud, that one's in the cloud. All right, that's USDC, USD. This is not going to have a cloud that makes sense. This is basically just priced at 1 most of the time, right? Doge in the cloud. And you get a broader sense of where the trades are and where they're not. And this is, again, one of the reasons why I really like Near here. It's one of the few coins that's still above the cloud, is held above the cloud. It's not chopping around inside of the cloud. So yes, it has, this easier scene on maybe the 12-hour head and shoulders, multi-shouldered, complex, whatever you want to think of it as. Like maybe we get another shoulder there, maybe we don't, but this pattern looks very real to me. Your stop loss on this, at least for me, would be anything below the right shoulder. You will rarely see, complex inverted head and shoulders that has another shoulder that's lower than the previous shoulder. Typically, you don't see that. But what you'll notice is it's still above the cloud on the daily. It's still above the cloud on the 12-hour, right? Like the pattern helps you maybe with the breakout trade or with the entry of the breakout trade. But the cloud is still telling you this still leans bullish. And we can go down the list for the rest of this stuff. Almost nothing is above the daily cloud right now. So that really says, again, the strength of Near. FET is another one. Adam and Eve, maybe it's above the cloud soon-ish. Doesn't look completely horrible. Maybe consider a trade there based on the cloud. Render, again, these AI coins doing quite well. Ripple's going to be a giant mess. And this is just another signal to me that says this is untradeable. This does not have a discernible trend over any given period of time. And what I would do on anything that looks like this is go to the 3-day. Is there anything here that's a signal? Not really. Let's go up to the weekly. Is there anything here that's a signal? In the moment, definitely not, right? We're still bearish. We're below the cloud. Now that may change into Q4. We're talking late into Q4, December, maybe, if we can get above the cloud. And if you're logged in, you can set an alert at a specific level and kind of just set it and forget it. But what I'm not going to do on this chart is go down to like the hourly and say, oh man, is there a trend here? I'm going to trade this. That's just not for me. Higher time frames always win. WIF also not enough to really see what's going on here. So you just have to bump that down. Go to the 12-hour. Is there anything? Kind of, sort of. It's still above the cloud. Let's go to the 6-hour. Kind of just ranging around, right? So I think you get the idea. Very quickly, we can assess on any coin that has enough data on the daily, is there an actionable signal here? No, right? I want to see this. I want to see something like this. This is not a long signal down here, at least based on the trend, based on the cloud. Now you could argue chart patterns, you could argue all sorts of other stuff, right? But that is not trend trading. That is something else, which may work just fine for you, but I'd certainly prefer to be on the side of trend trading, again, below the cloud. So I think you get the point. Most of these just in the moment right now are not it. But this is one reason to maybe check these once a week like I do, because you don't want to miss when these are close to breaking out, right? Because you want to have an actionable setup in mind before these break out. Now, one other thing to consider here is just broadly on like chart patterns. We could see a bunch of these make massive head and shoulders on the high time frames and break below their high time frame clouds. That's also an option. So to me, all of this just says not yet on most of these. ETH daily below the cloud, right? It had a great run above the cloud. Great run. Again, if you did nothing but look at the cloud, ignored the TK lines, you're long here, you're out here. Your entry is 1650, your exit is like 3300 plus. That's a great trade. The cloud doesn't know that it's going to see that trend. It doesn't know that ETH has just been in a 250-day ascending triangle accumulation. It's just making sure that you're on the right side of that trend if we do get the breakout. prior to that, you can see how noisy this got, right? Right in the cloud, above the cloud, below the cloud. When I see stuff like this, I go higher time frames for sure. And on like the 3-day, we had a breakout, and then you can use the lower time frame as a better signal. Historically on ETH, again, it's pretty clear cut. When we trend hard, and you really want to make sure, at least on the daily, you're on the right side of that. You can always try to contra trend trade this. It's not smart. Most people lose money, but price relative to the cloud is always trying to tell you how strong the trend is, where the trend is, if there's a trend, stuff like that. On the weekly here, we're still barely above the cloud, so we're still bullish, but this could certainly dip back into the cloud and squirrel around down there. But so far, so good at the moment. Solana high time frame. Again, this is an example if we look at the daily, right? Look at how messy this is. Early 2023, did great in 2022, but then it got messy, right? So if I'm coming to this in like July 2023, what do? I go to the 2-day or 3-day, and it just cleans it all up, right? Boom, you're seeing, okay, 26 is the level that we finally got the breakout. Not only that, but it's helping you identify an inverted head and shoulders here on the chart pattern. So it kind of forces you, in a sense, to check the higher timeframes, because to me, if I'm seeing this going in and out of the cloud, that's not a signal that's worth taking. So it forces you to slow down. It forces you to go to the higher time frame and forces you to wait, right? And this was months and months of people saying, it's the bottom. I know it's the bottom, blah, 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 right? That's fine. They were right this time. Good for them. I'm happy. But the cloud told you exactly where to get in on a 3-day. And we're still above the 3-day cloud. The daily cloud here on Solana is getting ready for another breakout, potentially, but as it stands here, it's pretty noisy, messy chop. If we dial it back to like 2021, you can see how we dipped into the cloud, got below the cloud flipped bearish, and then we had our breakout, right? This is ideally what we want to see going into July here. For Solana, for any alt, that's certainly a preferable signal. We can also look on the 8-hour. Again, you have to read the room. Are we in 2023 range-bound sort of situation? Or are we in Q4 2023 to present where we are largely trending? So you have to know if it's safe to use the 8-hour or not as a signal. I'd argue here it probably is. So if we get above the 8-hour cloud, that's probably good enough for an entry. But we're not there yet. We're just not there yet. Link's another great example of using high versus low time frames. You can see in the daily cloud 2022 and 2023, it was all over the place. The moment I see this, and I talked about this in 2023, you have to use the higher time frames. You just have to. You have to slow it down, and this isn't going to run away without you if you randomly are using the 3-day instead of the daily, right? What does this tell you on the daily? To me, it tells me nothing other than here's your horizontal line, right? Which is fine. That's good enough. But the cloud is telling you on the 3-day, like, look, this is where we probably are going to see a potential move because the cloud is 30 periods ahead of price. So in this case, it was giving you a clue 90 days ahead of time where we potentially may see the breakout, right? So you can get prepared for that. So it's had a great run. Since then, it's now back in the 3-day cloud. It doesn't look so hot. It's even below the daily cloud. Daily cloud resetting here. So if this can muster a daily breakout, I love it. But here it is no trade. It is bearish. And again, it's setting up for a potential macro head and shoulders, which is a problem, which would suggest complete bearish reversal. All the more reason not to touch this thing until it's back above the daily cloud. Near I talked about, looks great. Don't really need to go back into that one. Even on the 8-hour, right? You'll notice that if it looks good on the daily, it probably looks excellent on lower time frames. If it looks good on the 3-day, it probably looks excellent on lower time frames, right? Another reason the high time frames are going to be where it's at. Now, if we delve into like older altcoins, right? Now, don't worry, new altcoin traders, I've got something for you. But if we delve into older altcoins, you'll just see why people are mostly Bitcoin maxis if you've been here for many years. This is the USD pair. This isn't even the BTC pair. BTC pairs look much more tragic than this, but this is the 2-day Zcash, and it spent arguably almost 3 years below the cloud. Recently in 2023 tried to get above and just cannot muster an entry or a bullish continuation above the cloud. Kind of similar to Tesla, where it has this huge triple top and it broke down. You know, as long as we're below the cloud, the expectation is always going to be bearish. Even all the way back here in 2017, 2018, what did you have? Another head and shoulders eventually this broke down. So if you're trading or holding on to some altcoin that from yesteryear, some dinosaur, if it's had trouble holding above high time frame clouds, you should expect lower lows. That's just a given. Dash is another one. Dash has not held above the cloud since 2021. On the 3-day, the expectation is bearish continuation. Now, if in Q4 this year we get a close above the 3-day cloud, that to me is an actionable signal worth taking. I don't care that it's a dinosaur. I don't care that nobody uses it. I don't care that XYZ reason. This is good enough from a technical standpoint. From a fundamental standpoint, I would avoid it. But if this can close above 35 within the next 6 months, it probably has a shot at going somewhere. I don't know where that is, but certainly less bearish and more bullish than it has been over the past 4 years. Some of these newer coins, again, as an example, Render, you had your Wyckoff accumulation down here, your breakout. We're in and out of the cloud a bunch, but for most of this trend, we've been above the cloud. We're back above the cloud again. And it generally is just pretty easy to see what's going on here, right? Are we bullish or are we bearish? It shouldn't take you too long to figure that out, regardless of what you're using as an indicator. This is bonk, caught the bottom, lower time frames, not a lot of data here. But again, it gets you in at a reasonable spot on the 6 hour. I know there's a lot of people who trade alts on like the hourly using the cloud. Totally fine. Here's JUP on the 4 hour. Again, it gets you in, tells you where it's slowing down, momentum potentially reversing, and definitely tells you to get out before the broader breakdown in April. And here it's telling you we may have a chance for bullish continuation again. I tend to think we're going to get some sort of triple bottom here broadly across everything. So I think it may be a little bit early, but the cloud looks great. It's undeniably giving you a bullish signal here. Looking at the older memeier coins, the metaverse and NFT coins, the weekly clouds that I've been highlighting are inevitably some sort of like 3-day cloud, whatever, some sort of lower time frame breakout. It's just, I think they're better. I think this is best seen as an edge to edge on the weekly rather than a breakout on a lower time frame. But that's also an option to consider to look at this, to look at these types of charts. Last few examples here on legacy. Most of this stuff I'm talking about on a week-to-week basis because I think it's that important to pay attention to, not because I love PayPal, the company, not because I love what they do, but because as a technical trader, when something closes inside of the 3-day cloud for the first time since 2021, that's a pretty big deal. And you can see since inception, since listing, since IPO, how well PayPal held above this high time frame cloud. So I would say this is a very actionable signal that is likely to be respected. Whether or not this will lead to some massive high percentage move, I don't know. That's not the point. The point is, what does the entry look like? The entry looks like a long entry eventually, if price can remain sideways, at 66. If this goes sideways into Q4, then we would satisfy the conditions being above the 3-day cloud. Here's another example of like an altcoin that's been around for a long time. Peloton, okay. Peloton on the daily cloud. You can see post-COVID, it did great initially, right? Since then, it's really been below the daily cloud most of the time. Again, these are 1852, 104, 26 on the settings. It's had a very hard time holding up the daily cloud. Only briefly in 2023, you had even an inverted head and shoulders on that breakout. But other than that, it really, really has not looked great for Peloton. Here's Zoom. Again, you'll see examples of this on altcoins that have been around for a while or on BTC pairs where they'll do great for a little while. But once they reverse, they're kind of just in the dumpster for a long time. So if later on in the year, we start to break above the 3-day cloud for Zoom, okay, I like that as a trade. Doesn't say anything about the company, doesn't say anything about the fundamentals of the situation. All I'm looking for here is that this has respected the cloud for 3-4 years, right? And the cloud is just trying to give you a heads up on a change of character in the trend. Lastly, this is Morgan Stanley. Again, much like the near example, the trend for these breakout trades that are of high time frame is probably already on your side, and partially why these breakout trades work so well to begin with, or work better when you have the trend on your side. I would argue this is a inverted head and shoulders. This is a breakout trade, blah, blah, blah. But we've been above the cloud since Q4 2023, right? So this is already leaning bullish. So do yourself a favor. set up the cloud, whatever software you're using. You can pop it on Kraken Pro, make your watch list, make your favorites, and just, let's just go through the list, right? Here's a top gainers on the bottom here. There were a lot of people who get super excited about week to week moves, but that's not really what excites me. What excites me is expectations of bullish continuation, expectations of multi-month moves, right? I mean, this is rep. Instantly, the cloud is telling you this thing has not been a worthwhile trade over a long period of time. And then something like Brick, you'd have to go way down on the timeframes to see what's going on. So that's all I have for this one. Like, dislike, comment, share, subscribe, and happy trading.